I love this saying, every masterpiece was created one stroke at a time.
Hmm.
So if
You
we
know,
think about these masterpieces, they didn't just like that, the artist had just one stroke. So that's how I'm looking at it. Build it one word at a time.
yeah. A couple thoughts. Taking a break from things. There's a neuroscientist at Stanford named Andrew Huberman, and he has a
Yeah.
very popular podcast these days. You've heard of him.
Yeah.
And he grew up as a skateboarder, and I'm a skateboarder. So I love listening to him because we have this shared interest as well. And he talks about how in skateboarding or other sports, when you try something, you're trying to do a trick or a move or whatever it is, your brain is part of that equation. And sometimes you just can't get it. And he says, if you go to sleep and sleep overnight, your brain works on that while you're sleeping. And then the next day, all of a sudden, it's easy because your brain was repeating that motion and it's in your brain over and over and over again. And then the next day, everything falls together. And he said there's research to show that this is how your brain works. And I think it's the same with writing and a lot of other things that you might be taking a break or you feel like you're taking a break, but your brain behind the scenes is still working on that. So you come back to it and all of a sudden things fall into place and you think, wow, how did that happen? I haven't even thought about this for 2 weeks. Well,
Yeah.
you haven't thought about it consciously, but maybe your brain was still working on it behind the scenes and figuring stuff out.
Yeah. I do think that's the case to some degree, and we've all experienced this. It's always great to know that there's evidence for it and that it's not random or an accident. So
Mhm.
we'll see.
Yeah.
I'll report back after the hour.
And the other thing about getting the writing time in, this is such a complicated thing. And I don't know of any author who hasn't struggled with this. I know Stephen King struggled with it, even though he's prolific, but he had periods where he was not able to write and just couldn't
Mm,
get the words out. And every other author I know of struggles with this. Nicole, who was on earlier, talked about how she's trying to get out of her house to write now because it's harder to write at home. So she said she goes to luxury hotel lobbies and works there, and she finds it easier to focus and write there. Um, Neil Gaiman, who wrote Coraline and a bunch of other popular books, he said his rule is he'll go out every morning and he has a table outside that he sits at, and he says, I don't have to write, but I can't do anything but write. So I can think, I can just sit there, or I can write, but I'm not allowed to do anything else. I can't check email, I can't read, I can't do anything but work on my book or just sit and think. And so he sits there for an hour, and sometimes he says he just sits there for the whole hour and doesn't write anything, and he just sits and he thinks. But he says that's how he gets his books done. For me, the best writing experience I've had to date is a book I haven't published yet, but it's finished with its first draft. And it's about 400 pages. It's a lot of text. And it
mm.
felt so easy, but the the routine I got into was it was just the first thing I worked on every day. And I would just tell myself, 15 minutes. That's all I need, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I would sit down and I'd write for 15 minutes every morning. And some days I'd just get a tiny bit out, but then some days I'd be like, oh, I'm in the flow. This is feeling great. And I would just keep going. And then I'd end up writing for 5 hours or something. And that book just spilled out so easily but the one rule for me was the first thing and just 15 minutes. And it spilled out. It was really easy to get that out.